I'm Teresa Francesca Rossi. Grazie mille. No, io sono contentissima. Devo dire, Rabbi BEMPORAD, non importa in quale modalità, se faccia a faccia o online, ascoltarla è sempre estremamente arricchente. And, so veramente online is as much fascinating as face to face.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you very much. I have 2 questions, if I may,
Sure.
and then you can decide how much time dedicate to
Sure.
it. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. My first question was about science and religion. In ancient thought, science was the realm of the certus ordo, as St. Thomas says also. So the certitude, the certainty of the phenomenon. Whereas religious realm was the realm of the lack of certitude, in a sense. And you mentioned Job in your speech, and which is an example, that in fact, no matter how good you are, your destiny don't necessarily follow accordingly. You may be a good person and not always rewarded appropriately.
Right.
So science, the realm of certainty, and religion, the realm of uncertainty. But am I correct? You were saying exactly that you were shifting this perspective, in a sense, correct? Basically that religion is the realm of certitude, whereas science is the realm of unpredictability, which I have to say sounds very strong, especially in this context of this pandemic, where science is definitely, physical phenomenon, sciences are certainly very unpredictable. So my first question is, am I correct? Are you really suggesting, I was tempted to switch the perspective of the ancient times. That was my first question. So if you are really suggesting this kind of a shift. The second question is, since you mentioned God, the rationality of God, and the logics of God. I like very much what you were saying about thinking logically. That's made me think about Benedict XVI, Carinthians lectures, when Benedict XVI was talking about the first enlightenment in history. And he was saying it was not in the 18th century, but it was the biblical vision, was the real first enlightenment. When God called the moon and the sun, which were the gods of other religions, he calls things that he made, that he created. Yes. So if God is rational, God is logic, science is rational and logic, it seems that is a realm for science and religion to start a dialogue. But what about wisdom? My question is, it seems to me that science really is lacking wisdom. And so my question is, which theological or philosophical approaches would you see as suitable to foster a dialogue with science for a reproposition of God based on wisdom, if there are?
I knew that I could always count on you, Teresa, to ask questions that I haven't the foggiest notion how to answer.
No.
But I will do my best. I will do my best.
It's so rich that you give a lot of insights.
Well, first of all, I would say that science is really not. I disagree with the belief that science somehow gives you certainty. I don't think so. The best that science can do, and here I mean science more as a methodology, as a means of investigation, which ultimately requires some understanding of empiricism, because actually you have to find some way of validating what it is that the scientific method provides, which is basically a categorical scheme that integrates whatever it is you're integrating, whatever it is you're describing, as consistent, comprehensive, and applicable. That's what you mean by science. In any particular science, what you're saying is that I have this categorical scheme which is consistent. The various premises have to be consistent with one another. They have to be comprehensive. It has to explain everything that's needed to be explained. And then it has to project hypothetically ways in which I can test it to make sure that I'm correct. Now, you have a great number of problems in science here, for the very simple reason that at each step, you find that this categorical scheme is limited. And what you thought was obvious and perhaps even self-evident turns out not to be self-evident at all. Perhaps the best example of that is that everybody thought Euclidean geometry was self-evident and that parallel lines never meet. But then you know yourself that Einstein found that that wouldn't work. So you had Riemannian geometry, and then Lobachevskian geometry. Riemannian says that they all meet at many places, and Lobachevsky says they never meet. Now, the interesting thing is that Einstein needed that for the theory of relativity. So from the point of view of Newtonian physics, the theory of relativity makes absolutely no sense because there's no stable space and time in relativity. And in quantum mechanics, another fundamental premise of science, there is no clear and stable continuity. And the reason there's no stable and clear continuity is because you have gaps. You know yourself that the Heisenberg principle, which is basically a principle that says it's not certain, that if you know the location, you really don't know the momentum, and if you know the momentum, you don't know the location. So just in physics, you have the problem that there's no certainty, and each way, and each one in its own realm basically makes a lot of sense. Now, there's all kinds of attempts to clarify that, but I would say it's very hypothetical. But even perhaps the most serious and the clearest example of science, which would be mathematics. Well, even mathematics isn't so clearly clear. For example, you have Gödel's proof or Gödel's theorem, which says that any set of axioms, rules of inference, and premises in mathematics cannot actually explain itself. You actually have to go beyond it and need another and further way of doing it. Then you have the axiom of choice. The axiom of choice in mathematics, which basically shows that it's not exactly clear that you can call that a complete and accurate science. So now I can go on with biology, psychology, history, and so forth. I would say that at best what you've got is an endeavor to try to understand what is there to be understood in terms of consistency, comprehensive, and applicability. Now, let's turn now to religion. I think when you're dealing with religion, as I tried to point out in the first part of my talk, you have to start by asking yourself the question, why is it that people are religious? I mean, why is it that people are religious? Why is it, for example, that they feel kind of a need, they have almost certain fundamental prerequisites just to live and to exist? And I tried to say that there were four, that there may have been more. It just so happened that I thought those four were central, and that is, every human being needs to find some way in which he or she fits into the world. Every human being needs reassurance. Every human being needs recognition. Every human being needs to feel part of something greater, something more significant than himself or herself. And there are authentic and inauthentic ways of resolving those needs. Here, I think I learned that from Fromm. I pointed out that I had a really marvelous afternoon with Erich Fromm and read a great deal of his work, that everybody needs a frame of orientation and an object of devotion. Now, does that mean that that frame of orientation, an object of devotion, or the attempt to answer those four basic needs is certain? On the contrary, I wouldn't say that at all. For example, one of the ways which we see how to resolve this is by turning to a cult, turning to a leader. The leader then takes on the burden of existence. The leader takes on himself the characteristic of the fear of life and the fear of death. I will overcome for you your fear of life and the fear of death. Just be loyal to me and follow what I say. And so we've had ample of examples of these cultic leaders who become tyrants and become now, you might say this is a religion. Are you going to tell me that the slavish adoration of Stalin was not a religion? When you had a perfume that was called Stalin's breath, come on now. Well, here I think, and I tried to say this in my talk, you need reason, you need science to get you out of this fix that I will believe whatever illusion the leader tells me. I will believe in whatever fantasies. I will live in a fantastic, illusory world because I find it comforting. You've got to have some sense of truth. So here I would say not only science, but also religion needs a process, a methodology of investigation. And here one feeds the other. Because what science can do is it can help religion in those areas, as you have today, for example, where you have people who are saying there's no real scientific evidence for COVID. It's all a hoax. There's no real scientific evidence for the environment going to disastrous death. I mean, this is ridiculous. Of course, there's scientific evidence. Or on the other way around, so you need science, but on the other hand, science, as you said, is not enough. You also have to have a sense of wisdom, which was part of your third question, which is basically that there has to be, and Plato put it very well when he said, what is wisdom for Plato? Plato says wisdom is the knowledge of ends. So you have to have a knowledge of ends. You have to have a sense of what is my life all about? Where am I going? How do I live my life? How do I acquit myself so that I live with integrity? How do I have some confidence that what I'm doing will make a difference in the world, not just to me, but to my children and the people come after me? How can I have the assurance, as I said in my final, that somehow whatever evil I face and whatever horror I face is not going to totally make it impossible for me to live my life? I have to find sources of confidence, sources of hope that will reaffirm that sense that life has meaning. That's what religion is all about.
Thank you very much, Rabbi BEMPORAD. Thank you so much.